Hi, my name's Erwin, and this is the Poetry Lighthouse podcast. In today's episode, I had the pleasure to interview poet Nilam Patel, who will talk about her debut poetry collection, Finding Her, Being Her. All right, so thank you again. Thank you so much for being here. It's such a pleasure to have you. And so today we're going to talk about your poetry collection. And first of all, I would like to ask you to introduce yourself a little bit and tell us what brought you here.
My name is Nilam Patel. I am based in the USA in Austin, Texas. I'm an artist and poet. I'm a mother of two, and I've always been interested in creating art, using my creative energy, and just very recently started, using that energy for writing. And really just got inspired by other poets, but also just from my own journey and using it as an outlet. And just, in saying what brought me here today, really just want to talk about my book, talk about it in, a way that really explains what triggered everything, and what really brought me to create a book out of it, because that was not, really what I sought out to do when I started writing poetry. It was really created as a healing process for me. So would love to kind of share how I got here.
Great, thank you very much. And could you tell us what is your collection about? Like, how could you describe it?
Yeah, so my collection, it's really a journey. That's why it's called a journey of poems. It really describes both my life and just observations from other people that I've encountered. So not only does it cover, poetry about daughters and mothers, but it also really talks about women that may be even older than me, grandmothers, and just, what happens in older age. And so that's why I think it resonates with so many different people, both men and women. And it really just tells the secrets of what women think about, what we feel, what we survived, whether or not we talk about it. It's something that, I really want to use as a way for others to feel seen. I think a lot of people maybe don't know how to talk about it, don't know who to talk about it with. And I was definitely there before I started writing. And so just wanting to share that outlet with the world, whether it, creates this energy for others to start writing poetry or to even begin reading poetry more. That's really what my collection is for. I really just want to be that voice and continue telling my story in other ways that I find are really important for others.
And I think this collection is a sort of feeling related to your words. And I think this connection, this kind of understanding and mutual kind of encouragement is definitely something that poetry can make us feel. And it's so beautiful. And thank you for that. Um, I would also like to know what inspired you and motivated you to write this poem. Do you have any kind of rituals when it comes to writing? Do you have any sort of tips that you can give to writers to write?
Yeah. So the spark for this book was definitely a trigger related to motherhood, pregnancy, loss, and grief. And that was an experience that happened, many years ago. But the trigger is what really just brought all those feelings rushing back. And I really decided to write about it for the first time ever. And, once I started writing, I just really just never stopped. I think, a lot of people don't know that I actually wrote my entire book in about 2.5 months. I think it just all was stored in my mind, and it just was an outlet that I never knew existed. And it just opened up those floodgates. And once I started writing about that tragedy and once I started healing from it, I realized that there were so many other things that I still had yet to heal from. And so not only does my book have topics that have to do with grief and motherhood, but it also talks about so many other types of life skills and lessons that all of us learn and go through throughout our childhood, adulthood. And, you know, that's why I think it's such a versatile read. I think people of all ages have been reading it, and there's so many different point of views and perspectives that my readers have told me. And, you know, that's what I feel like is so amazing about writing and poetry is, you know, yes, you're one voice, but it may trigger or it may resonate with someone that has a completely different experience. Um, but I mean, in terms of our rituals when we write, what processes do we as writers, you know, use? I think that really the main thing that I would tell people is, you know, never force your writing or your art. You know, live in the emotion, you know, target whenever you're feeling joy, sorrow, happiness, anger, and don't push it away, but actually say, you know, I'm so happy that I'm feeling this way because I can actually use that as an outlet to now create something. And once you do that, it helps you heal. So you fully felt it, and then you created something beautiful with it. And you didn't just, you know, keep it, you know, deep down, ready to explode when, you know, you least expect it. So I think a lot of us maybe are taught to suppress our emotions or told that it's not the right time to feel them. But I feel like ever since I started using my creative energy again, I actually wait for those emotions to come and I actually enjoy experiencing them, which is maybe a weird thing to say because when you're feeling sorrow, you don't want to feel sorrow, but I feel like it's another opportunity for me to heal from whatever it is in that moment that made me feel that way. And so I would encourage, you know, if you have an experience at a grocery store, or if you see a mother helping a daughter, or if you see something on social media that maybe brings you anger, you know, write that word down and come back to it when you're ready. I think those are the skills that I've realized because being a mom, I don't have that much time to devote to writing. So I just come back to it whenever I can. I look at all those different notes, and that's what sparks a lot of my poems. Sometimes it could be, you know, the word fuchsia, and it just sparks something. And I think, oh, that's a really interesting word, and I'll write it down. And then it'll turn into a poem maybe months later, but it's there for me to come back to. Um, so that's probably the only process that I really use. And like I said, you know, just don't ever force it. Just go with whatever you're feeling in that moment and use it to your advantage.
Yeah, and I think it's really important. I think it's so beautiful the way you describe it, because isn't it amazing the fact that writing and poetry can be an outlet to our emotions? And I think we can find a lot of healing when it comes to our sorrows or our pains or even our daily kind of struggles. And we can just tap into it, and it totally opens up this kind of dialogue with ourselves, and it makes us figure out a lot of things that we've kept so deep within ourselves during our childhood, and that we've never had the time, energy, or did not know how to express them. And I think it's poetry is one of the most beautiful and very nice place to start, because it's so short that you allow yourself to get trapped in the moment. It's not like a novel that you have to get back into it when you feel like it. You know, you can just go for it in one go, and it's just, I think it's very powerful because of that.
I agree. I think I used to, oh, sorry. I was just
No,
saying I
go
used
ahead.
to read novels and start them over and over. And I never finished the novel and I would feel guilty about it. And then I realized like, you know, poetry is something that you don't have to feel guilty about not finishing because, you know, if you're feeling like, you know, in a mood, then that could be a short-lived moment where you read a poem and then you feel that way and you move on in your day. And so, like you said, like, I mean, you said it so well. I think it is just a moment of time that you write a poem, and then a moment in time that you read a poem, and then you can move on. And it doesn't have to be this lingering thing. But it very well could be. I mean, some poems, they resonate in your mind for days, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I think poetry can be mo more therapeutic than academia focused. But it could also be vice versa. And I think, a lot of people look at poetry in one way, but I think now, I think people are looking at it a lot differently and seeing all the different ways poetry can serve you.
Absolutely agree with that. Um, and so when you published your book, you did self-publishing, or did you go through some other type of process? And how was your experience throughout this process?
So I definitely self-published. I chose to self-publish just from speaking with a lot of different writer friends and people that have gone through that journey. I felt like I wanted, at least for my first book, to keep that creative energy, and to just not change anything. My first book is definitely a journal. My drawings are sketches that I created out of emotion. I never edited them. I think I took pictures of them on my phone and uploaded them. I mean, it was that raw. And so I just didn't want anyone to touch it. And just so given that, I decided to self-publish. The journey has been a huge learning curve, but I will say it's doable. I think you just have to have that dedication. I did find a lot of hiccups and bumps along the road, but I will say that the learning experience that I have gotten, um, is just priceless. And I think that, for my next book, I may try a different path. I may decide to not do some of the things I did myself, but just knowing how to do them, knowing what it takes, the time and the energy, I think brings me a little bit more clarity on what I'm willing to hand off to someone, or what I'm willing to maybe use some of my budget for. And I think as authors, we have to really pick and choose what we're willing to give to someone else, because it is our pride and our joy. It's something that we've created from scratch, and it's hard to maybe delegate those tasks.
Hmm.
So just doing them myself and knowing, okay, these are things that I feel like I just did not enjoy doing, that I felt like my time was better spent creating. Um, and so just having those thoughts in my mind going forward, I think will really put me in a better position.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of challenges that one has to face when we decide to go for self-publishing. What would you say it's your biggest challenge?
I would say just the formatting and marketing parts of a book. I think most authors don't enjoy those. I know most writers, they don't know how to write about themselves. Therefore, it's hard for them to market themselves. A lot of us have that imposter syndrome, or we might be able to write beautifully about other topics, but writing about yourself is just a task, I feel like, because you just feel you're not going to be able to serve, you as a writer, in the way that you want. You may be scared to say some things, or you may be reluctant to, over exaggerate some of your skills. And I think that it's easier if someone else, that's unbiased from the outside, can really read your book, get to know you, get to know your passions, and then write something. And I felt like that is one thing that I did use, as a delegating task, and I feel happy about that. I don't feel like the snippets of my book and myself that I have on my website, or just my book description. I don't think that I could have written those myself and done it justice in the way that
Mhm.
they were able to.
Well, Congratulations for it, because it takes a lot of work and dedication and time. Um, so I think our listeners might be eager to, at this point, to listen to one of your poems. So we will discuss three featured in your collection. Um, but before we start with the first poem, could you give us a little bit of what you were inspired when you wrote this first poem?
Sure. So this poem is one that I definitely didn't know if I was actually going to put in my book. I don't know if a lot of people would be able to resonate it with it, or if it would maybe cause any type of triggers. But a friend once told me that those are the types of poems that are needed in our world. And so, it really came from my childhood, from seeing other women in their marriages or in their lives, daughters and sisters, the patriarchy that we experience in our world. Uh, Obviously, a lot of our cultures and, globally, not just my culture, but I see it time and time again, where women don't feel seen, or they feel like they have to give up things that maybe men don't, or they feel like maybe, they're hoping for the next generation to have a little bit of an easier life. Um, and I hear a lot of people maybe say, oh, well, that doesn't happen in my culture. Um, and those are the types of things I love to hear. But at the same time, let's not forget that these are not black and white, situations. There's so many gray areas of where hints of it exist, and we need to recognize those as well. I think from, the previous generation, things have progressed so much, things have gotten a lot different. But at the same time, that's not saying that we don't need to continue talking about it and continue, reminding or just expressing what we felt growing up or what we feel now. And so that's what this poem is about. It's just about representing all those different phases of life a woman goes through and how she continuously feels like that, and why we continue to persevere.
Right. Yeah, I think that's very important still nowadays, even if we feel that our world has changed and people are more open-minded. Well, the truth is that sometimes we might find a lot of exceptions, especially in some countries and cultures where unfortunately this is not the case. So I think this is still something very, very important. And although a lot of people might, as you said, think that this is a poem from the 19th, 20th century problem stuff, it actually brings us back to reality. And I think that's really important. Could you be able to read us the poem, please?
Yes. While boys play, girls will clean. While men relax, women will cook. While brothers study, sisters will serve. While fathers are praised, mothers will be judged. While husbands work, wives will give up passions. But while the male mind is simple, the female mind remains complex. And while gods gloat, goddesses will create entire universes.
Wow. Well, I mean, the ending is quite a thing. I really enjoyed it. It's so, so beautiful. The aphorism that comes at the end, that alludes to this grand god and goddesses, and you kind of like the dichotomy of our perception towards these gods, because even from the Greeks we have that these gods are always veneered, and our perception of masculinity and also later on and throughout history, patriarchal societies and ideas that been carried out. And I think these ending kind of provides us a different kind of shift from the point of view of the god is the king and the one and only, to actually goddesses make all the hard work, and here's how amazing women are, and you have to recognize it as much as you recognize the gods. Um, So I think that's really interesting. And so when you mentioned boys, girls, or men, women, how general did you intend to make these pronouns or kind of subjects to be reflected about on our society? Is it, are you calling out to the whole population of one specific country, sort of ethnicity? Who is reflected in this poem?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think when I was writing it, I was looking at my culture. Um, my parents are from India. I grew up in a home and in a culture where, I saw these things often. And I thought that maybe it was just my culture. But as I grew up and as I started experiencing and traveling and just really just speaking to so many other women all over the world, I think I realized that, although it may be not so transparent or in your face, like this is what women do, this is what men do. I think the idea of it and the hints of it, even though it may be discreet, I think it does exist in many homes, um, and so I realized that there are a lot more women that resonate with this poem than I ever imagined. Um, I think when I first published this poem, um, the amount of comments and messages that I received from women of all different backgrounds, different ages, different ethnicities, it just amazed me. And I don't think that I actually realized that. Um, but in some way, shape, or form, this poem resonates with most women. And I think as men, that's something to realize. And I think that that's something to think about, once in a while to maybe understand that, if the women around you feel even one of the lines of this poem, then that's something that we may need to work towards still. Things are not just fixed. There's still a long road to go, and the first step is to really hear women, to see them, and even though as men, it's hard to understand women, which I know that. Um, the key is men that have the compassion and the skills of empathy to try. And I think that that's what my goal was in writing this poem.
This was the first part of our interview with Nilam Patel. Please click on the next episode to listen to the second part. Thank you for listening to the Poetry Lighthouse. If you liked this episode, don't forget to share and subscribe to our podcast. You can also visit our website, thepoetrylighthouse.com, where you can read and submit your works of poetry and short stories. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram to keep updated. This is the end of the episode. Thanks again, and see you next time.